to the Possibility Perspective with me, Jess. Authentic, bold, and challenging conversations. You'll hear stories from me, conversations with peers, and interviews with experts on a variety of topics, all with different perspectives. Now, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Possibility Perspective. Today, we're going to get into numerology. And you probably clicked on this episode because either A, you're curious about it, or B, you're my mom and you click on all of my episodes. But I want to welcome you back today. And I want to welcome my guest, Melanie Ivey. And I'm going to let her tell you about her story. But I want to share what really resonated with me about her. And I'm actually going to read it right from her website because it feels like she brought what's in my heart out onto the paper, and I couldn't have said it better. And so this is what she wrote. My journey is a testament to the belief that every individual possesses the potential to transform their lives and the lives of others for the better. Through understanding, compassion, and the pursuit of wisdom, I look forward to further unfolding the layers of my being and contributing to a more just and compassionate world. That gives me goosebumps because it's literally how I feel. It's why I started this podcast to begin with. And so I am so honored that she said yes to this conversation. And so without any more of me babbling, welcome Melanie to the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you reaching out. Podcast has never been something that I really thought about or thought of doing. So it was definitely, it felt synchronicities, in all honesty, that, you just kind of reached out and asked me to join you.
Well,
Um,
yes. And I mean, you have power. I mean, you have, this mastery of a powerful tool that helps us understand ourselves, that helps us understand other people, that literally takes what you said in those words and brings it, into a practical application way of being and doing in the world. And so can we start with just your journey, where you, like your background and what led you to numerology?
yes, of course. I'm originally from South Africa. I grew up during the apartheid era, which was challenging, but my parents sort of helped us to stay focused and always sort of made us believe that we can really do anything we wanted, regardless of the circumstances that we were in. And so with that, straight out of high school, I had this really big desire to just sort of find myself, and I went traveling. I came back to South Africa, sort of did some stuff, and then found myself with an opportunity to come to New York, which I took. And I was like, all right, let me see where this goes. And it's literally been sort of almost 19 years now that I've been here. So that was kind of the start of the journey. Like how I got into numerology, it was all around COVID. I was finding myself at a crossroads, and I'd gone home for just to see everybody after sort of everyone had been in lockdown and all of that. And I ran into an old friend of mine, Arlene, and she was raving about having met this guy who does numerology and who did her reading. And I was like, okay, I could give it a try. Like, there's nothing wrong in sort of experimenting and seeing where things go. And so I made this appointment with Richard Higgins, who happens to be the brain behind the modality of transformational numerology. And I mean, the session opened up so many explanations for me. Like I sat there and I was like, oh wow, like okay, so and I started putting things together that had happened in my life and was able to sort of pinpoint like what was really going on and what the numbers were showing me was going on in that time. And it just drew me in. It was like it was so simple. It was maths. Like it was just for me, it all made sense. I started, he showed me an example of at the time there was someone um, who a friend who I wasn't quite sure what was happening with the relationship, and he had done a compatibility between the two of us, reading, and then it kind of like made sense. Like I was able to see certain things about him that were sort of directly affecting how I was reacting to him, or and vice versa. So it kind of like it was almost, it felt like now I had like almost like the secret insight into like what was going on with him. And so I started like applying it to like other people too. And it really changed how I sort of handled certain situations or um, certain reactions. I mean, I will say, I haven't perfected it. At times, my usual patterns still come up, but I'm able to go back and be like, all right, this was coming from my place of insecurity, or, whatever the case may be. Um, but what the numbers showed me, like that time when I was sort of leaving or wanted to leave South Africa and wanted to go and travel, sort of that desire really showed up in the numbers in a strong way. Like with the numbers, you have your surface traits and you have your submerged traits. So the ones that sit under the, almost like an iceberg, the ones that sit under the water, and the ones that which they could call the shadow, the ones that you don't want to admit you have, it's all
Mhm.
those ones that sit under the water. And the real key with numerology is that when you know what's sitting under the water, you can try and balance it out. And that's really the key. It's balancing out your surface traits with your submerged traits to kind of keep everything in equilibrium. And so, what was happening for me when I wanted to travel so strongly after high school was the fact that the stability and security that my number four provided me was because I had a very stable, even though it was apartheid, my home life was very stable and secure. I had family, I had friends. There was nothing sort of out of the ordinary, but everybody knew everybody. I went to the same church, everybody knew, and I went to the same school, everybody knew my grandparents, my parents. And then I was starting to feel like trapped, like I was in this box of like, um, just what everybody thought I should be, or how they were, because they know
Mhm.
my parents and my grandparents, that I was feeling really trapped. And so what was coming up at that point was my number five, which was sitting underneath the surface, which is the adventurer, the traveler, the want to get out there, and that and because the at that point the stability and the security had been so strong and so grounded in me, I wasn't balancing it out with that number five that needed movement, that needed change, that needed to travel. Or, I mean, and look, and I'm using travel as an example because that's what worked for me. But sometimes it's even just changing sort of a location or changing a job or whatever, because those things will all balance it out as well.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh wow, okay, so that explains that. Like so it was quite sort of interesting to see it play out in that way. And then I have a one in one of the positions too, and one's very independent. It's the pioneer, it's the person that wants to do things, the one that wants to have his own business, which then kind of made it clearer at that point when I was at that crossroads that I was getting to the point where I really didn't want to work for anybody else anymore. I wanted to do my thing, that would sort of be my little project, my legacy, that kind of thing. So that's what
Yeah.
happened there. Um, and then the number, sort of the counterbalance to the one, is the eight, which is the perfectionist number. And the perfectionist number, I try to be a perfectionist sometimes, but it just doesn't happen. Like, and I've had to sort of come to terms with that I'm not the perfectionist in that way, that, I don't necessarily dot all my I's and cross all my T's all the time. Sometimes I can really just fling it and go with the flow. And so I've had to come to terms with that because I think in some stages or at some points in my life, I was trying to be the perfectionist or be perfect, whether it was with my parents or at school, like, and I think that was also an idea. I think how I carry myself is the idea that people get that I could be a perfectionist, but I'm not. So,
Interesting.
so then it was like, and like finishing stuff. Like I sometimes I can't get to finish a book. I can start a book, but can't finish it. Like there's just, and that's all plays out. That's what's playing out in the 1 and 8 dynamic. Um, and I've had to like be like, okay. I mean, when Richard said about like, oh, that's, it means not finishing something. And I'm like, oh, is that why I can't like, I knew it because I'd always wondered. I was like, why is it so hard for me to like finish something sometimes? Like, so that kind of explained it too. And the idea is really just to, when you're aware of it, it's easier to manage. It's easier to come at yourself with compassion. It's easier to be like, okay, let me try and break it down. Let me try and finish this book. Let me read like a chapter a day, and take it in small bites. So it definitely teaches you different things about yourself. And then
Yeah,
intuitively, I think we all know what we need to do to balance it out. We just sometimes need the awareness and the knowledge of it to be able to do it. So,
exactly. Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
how it started for me. And then originally, I wasn't even really thinking of doing numerology myself. I mean, through the past few years, Richard has been an integral part, in my journey, especially when I get stuck with how to handle something. But it was only when I was nannying that I started seeing the possibility of how it could really work really well if or give parents another tool to understand their kids or understand where the kids are coming from. And then with that, to maybe parent differently. There's so many parenting information out there, and it's all great. But this will define it a little bit more, like it defines it a little bit more, because I see it play out in like the 4-year-olds and the 5-year-olds that I'm looking after. Like, I mean, one of them has fives, sort of 3 5s in his chart. And 5 is the intellectual number, it's that travel adventure number. And he's very intellectual, but he needs to balance it out with stability and security. And I can see it. I can see it play out at the moment, even though he's really smart. He tends to go with his sort of what's submerged and goes into this sort of security and safety and stable, where he sometimes doesn't want to leave the house when I watch him. Like all he wants to do is just be home. And if his parents are going out, he can get very emotional about it. So it's interesting to see how early on it starts to play out in like little things. And we've had to adjust, not adjust things, but I've had to coax him to go out so that we can bring in the travel piece or the movement piece, like whether it's going to go play tennis or just running around on the field, playing soccer, because that's how you end up integrating the two sides of yourself, like
Yeah.
by balancing it out in that way. So and that's when it kind of started. I was like, well, if I can help kids or parents to understand themselves better and improve their relationships, maybe down the line when they're actually adults, it could have a ripple effect. Um,
Yeah.
in how they are out in the world.
Enormously. So, and so for those of you listening or watching this, think about this. Think about this, whether you're just for yourself, if you're a parent, if you're like a leader of a team, even in an organization, right? Think about it
Yeah.
that way, where it's interesting. I was just having a conversation with my dad about this last night, but there's, sometimes we operate from a space of this is who I am, and everybody needs to just try to like my way or the highway kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you could apply that in any of these buckets into parenting, into leadership, into
Mm-hmm.
friendship, into relationships.
Yeah.
But in reality, that's probably not going to work out well. That's probably why we see so much friction because
Yeah.
we don't have this openness and this understanding of,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is why this person is like this.
Yes.
It's not good, it's not bad, it just is.
Mm-hmm.
And now we move through these relationships with a little bit more compassion, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more understanding, a little bit more awareness of ourselves and the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more harmony.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Like it is, um, it definitely comes down to harmony at the end of the day. I mean, it's not perfect, like you could have a bad day, and then trying to remember at that point that this person is really like this because of that number or whatever. It's
Yeah.
not always easy, and we're all being programmed and hardwired a certain way. It's sort of unlearning to look at things the way we were taught. Um, and it does definitely take practice, but there is a potential of what it offers or what it can offer if we do start looking at it like that. If we do open ourselves up to trying to understand where the other person is coming from, like trying to understand what's going on for them or what's sitting underneath that could be triggering them at that moment, for example, or what's sitting underneath that they're so insistent on doing it their way,
Mhm.
like it's definitely, and yeah, if we can come with it with more compassion for one another, it can definitely open a whole lot more doors, I think, in relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because everything
Absolutely.
and growth. Like, they say you can't really grow or heal any of your wounds unless you're in situations that are pointing it out to you. So instead of sort of running away from what's being pointed out to you, if you went in with it and was open to looking at it and looking at it from both sides and kind of because it really does mean putting the ego to the side,
Mhm.
then I think people could relate to each other a whole lot better.
Yes, I agree. I agree 1,000%. And I know we probably have some people on the edge of their seats going, okay, but what is it? How does numerology work? Like you're saying these fives and these ones and these eights. What does all this mean? So let's break this down a little bit for people new to numerology. What are these numbers? What does it mean? How do we get there? How do we find out about it? And I know you did my numbers, and so we can use me as an example, but
Okay.
let's break this down for people.
All right. So then I'm actually going to share the screen now with your numbers on it so that people can kind of see what it looks like. Let's see.
And so any of you, by the way, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, the video version of this is on my YouTube channel. Just look up the possibility perspective on YouTube. That way you can see the chart that Melanie's going to be sharing.
As you can see, okay. So I put your date of birth on there. I hope that's okay.
That's fine.
Um, so, all right. So as you can see, it's based on like the macabre, which is two tetrahedrons sort of spinning in opposite directions. And it's really your auric field. Um, but Richard sort of used the triangle in this way, to kind of depict what sits and surface traits and what are the submerged traits. So the top triangle is your surface traits. So those are the things that you kind of probably know about yourself already and you see and other people see in you. And then the submerged traits are the ones that sit at the bottom. Um, so how I get the numbers, it's from your date of birth. So the month October will be you in your family section. So you break it down till it's one number. So when you add up the one and the zero, of course, you have one. And then your self number is the addition of the two and the one for 21, which gives you three. And then your worldly number, and it's really just, it could also be career, is where we add up all the numbers of the year and bring it down to one number so that we get eight.
Okay, so so I make sure people are staying with us. So I'm born in 1988. So 1 plus 9 is 10, plus 8 is 18, plus 8 is 26, right? So we're left with a
Yeah,
2 and a 6. So then you
yeah,
add 2 and 6 together equals 8.
correct.
Okay. I got it.
And then your life path number is the addition of those three numbers. So 8 plus 3 plus 1 equals 12, which then we break down to 3.
Okay.
And then the bottom part of the triangle. So with all of these, all of the numbers, you'll see they all end up adding up to 9, at least the ones that they're counterparts. So because you have a 1 in your family section, the counterpart for that is 8. And the way we really got that is just by subtracting 9. 9 is your sort of the the only number that really stands on it's on its own. It's and everything Tesla said, if you knew the numbers 3, 6, and 9, you'd know the secrets of the universe. So it
Mm.
really is sort of based on sort of that. The number 9 is your final number. Um, and that's how I get the 8. And then the same with the 6 for your soul path number, and the same for the world and the 6. So as you can see, when I said to you earlier that you seem to have two main themes,
Yeah.
that's what it is, the 1 and the 8 and the 3 and the 6.
Okay.
So, um, so then also I just wanted to say something else. So I have a 1 and an 8 as well, and the 3 and the 6. And it was actually very synchronicities that I had to do this for you, because then I started like things that I'd forgotten about myself were like coming up, and I'm going through some stuff. I've been going through some stuff like the last few months or so. And I was like, oh yeah, that's why that's coming up. Like, so it was like very interesting too that I had to do your chart, for this podcast, because it
Yeah.
started showing me some things that I was missing on my end for myself. Um, so yeah, so thank you for that.
Fascinating. Well, I truly believe everything is in divine right timing. So we were meant to do this.
Exactly, exactly. So we'll start with the 1 for the family. So like I said before, the 1 is it's the pioneer, it's the leader, it's the individual. It's very IQ, mental, starting things, sort of a very pioneering energy, which I can already tell you have because you started your own podcast. So, like, I think that's kind of where that comes in. I don't know, if you would disagree with that. And then it's the element of air, and it's got the yang energy. So, we all have male and female energies like yin and yang, and it really is all about balancing those out, because the
Mhm.
8 2 will be a yin energy. So again, it's all about balance. It's like a dance that those two numbers do together, the 1 8. Or all of the numbers, they have like a partner that they're dancing with to, balance out your personality. The negative side of that is the finishing things. I don't know if
Mm.
you can relate to that, but there's a few other stuff too. I guess for the 1 8, the biggest lesson would be, oh, and that's the sort of other thing I wanted to mention, is that all of these sort of carry life lessons, the lessons that we decided we were going to take on when we incarnated, like our soul's mission and those kind of things. Like that's all part of, can point to, that's what the numbers can point to, things that are happening in your life. So the biggest challenge or the biggest lesson for 1 8 is independence, standing on your own 2 feet, learning to be self-actualized.
Mm.
Um, and how that lesson can play out is the rug being pulled out from under you, like something happening that was very big for you, um, that then had to force you to kind of stand on your own 2 feet and that kind of thing. With my
Interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to share, you can. I'm not sure if it happened that way for you. For me, I kind of forced myself to leave home. That was my sort of rug being pulled out from under me. That was intentional.
Hmm.
And and then recently I sort of had sort of relationship thing, where the rug was also pulled out from under me. Um, so those are, and it really comes back down to standing on my own 2 feet, standing on your own 2 feet, and um, self-actualizing. That's kind of what
Yeah.
it's. the lesson happens to be. Um, with the eight, so the eight is the perfectionist number, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, organized goal setter. It's the female, it's the yin energy, and integrating the one and the eight is really about not necessarily sort of starting something new all the time, but actually building something. Like stay in a place for a while, build a legacy, build a career is kind of like what the eight, the one and the eight wants to do or where they
Mm.
want to go. Um, so I'm not, feel
It's
free to add.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense to me. And it also, I mean, one of the things you shared earlier, like there is kind of a push-pull with those things.
Yeah,
And I've felt that.
yeah.
Yeah, I've absolutely felt that.
Um, and then sort of a way to balance it out. Like if you needed to balance out and you couldn't, or you weren't building something fast enough or, finding that legacy quick enough, you could go for walks in nature. You could connect to the earth because the eight is an earth, is the element for eight is earth. Um, Gardening or those kind of things are things that could stabilize any of those sort of immediate feelings that come up, that push and that pull.
Yeah.
Um, so that's something that could help.
And that
In
makes
that,
sense why I crave that. I mean, that's what I feel like I say I do on the weekends is recharge my batteries when I'm feeling
yeah,
just like a little like
yeah.
chaotic or anything like that. And I go get in nature, whether it's hiking or yeah, even just
Mhm.
outside in the playing in the dirt in the garden. And I feel recharged and oftentimes have like a surge of creative, like forward movement energy too, of like, oh, this is the direction I need to go after doing that.
Yeah, so that's like, and see, and you intuitively knew that, like you intuitively, so we kind of already know some of the things.
Hmm.
Sometimes we just need sort of the guidance to trust it and to be like, oh, oh, yes, and this is sort of where I'm feeling more grounded
Yeah,
at the end of the day. So then you have the reverse on your career side, right? Where I'd be interested to know if you're very like a perfectionist, if you're a perfectionist in your job.
yes. Yes. Two, yes. Like enormously. And which is that's why it's kind of fascinating, yeah, that they're like opposite in the two
I
worlds.
know,
And
exactly.
that's probably a lot of the push pull I feel too is like I'm this person here and I'm this person here and what's the deal with that?
Yeah, exactly. So you're already recognizing the numbers, or recognizing it within yourself, but that's really what it is. It can be a little bit more intense because it's like going in opposite directions at the same time. Like you're on the highway and you're traveling in different directions, but at the
Yeah.
same time. So that's kind of like what it is. And there's an advantage to that. Like it can be intense, but the advantage is that there's potential for integration a lot quicker, because you're already innately aware of those numbers. You kind of know them. Like, you like with the eight, you're like, oh wait, but I know this feeling, it's just now it's at work as well. Like, so it's just it gives you insight into that. And you already have an understanding of it, so it's easier to identify. So there's definitely, you know, an advantage, but
Sure.
it can be intense if you're not sure what's happening. So I mean, in that case, like you really just need to like it's more about like so the eight is sort of perfectionist, crossing the T's, that kind of thing. And again, you would just apply it, you would apply things differently. Like where with your one, I would say with the eight and the one where you had in your world, like to balance it out, I would just say, sort of get back to you, like do your pioneering thing, which is I think what you did with doing your own podcast. So
Hmm.
you're kind of balancing it out quite nicely there, in that way, because at work you're one way, and
Hmm.
then in your sort of own podcast you're probably a little bit different.
Yes.
So that's kind of definitely um, a way of what it would look like if it was balanced,
Yeah.
in that way. And so then the three in your life path and in yourself. the three is the creative number. It's productive. So again, also, like it looks like what you're doing and where, in your life, as far as like the podcasts and working with the network, you you're really using your gifts. Like you're really, because the three number is the good work ethic. It's the productive, it's dedicated, it's motivated, it's creatively expressive. It looks, it has charisma. It looks like you're right there in that number in a really, really big way in both your life path in and in yourself. Um, which is really good. I mean, would you agree to that?
I agree. I agree with that
Yeah.
100%
Yeah.
because it is it, and in my yeah, work situation, I mean, I'm all of those things. I
Yeah.
and also in my other like world, I'm a musician
Yeah.
and I so yeah, all of it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, because then and that's the other thing too. Like um it's the potential to, entertain and inspire people through what would you through and through, yeah, and inspire people. Really, that's sort of what that number is creatively.
Hmm.
It's the creative number, almost like the artist number, you would say.
Sure.
So that's so you're in a good spot.
That's good. I like hearing that.
Yeah. Um, so the only sort of, I guess, the challenge that they usually say, or the lesson in there would be balancing work and play,
Mm.
which I think you kind of do, especially since you're saying you're a musician. I don't know if I mean, I'm sure do you view your music as play or does
I
it feel like
do.
work?
No,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
definitely do, but I know it's when I'm out of balance, I can feel it. Because
mm,
I do less of that.
mm,
And
okay.
I can feel that. And so it kind of what I was saying before is you're right. I intuitively know some of these things. And so when I'm starting to feel that way, I'm like, ooh, it's time to pick up an instrument and just play some music because I feel so much better when I do that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's exactly right. So that could be one of your challenges, or is the work and balance,
Hmm.
not becoming a workaholic and that kind of thing. Remembering to take some time to play.
Yeah.
So the sixth number, your soul path, is all about the heart. It's the humanitarian number. It's the number. What attracted you to what I said in that on my website. It's that number, and it's really, really sort of the giving and receiving, like remembering that we're all here sort of together, to give and to receive, give to others and at the same time receive. Um, the lesson here would be you're constantly learning about the gifts and the challenges of relationships, and love and nurturing yourself,
Mm.
is probably one of the biggest things again. So so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that rings true for you as well.
It does. It does. And one of my greatest challenges, I mean, I think it's, we're always all a work in progress, but is loving myself and the love that I have for people and the possibilities I see and like all the, all these things. And but also turning that back around on myself and not being so, and actually I can see that play out in kind of all of these, which is
Yeah,
that like not being too hard on myself and
yeah,
right. And so
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so that's it. So I mean, so really, I guess I would say the trick of life or the journey of life is really just balancing out our surface traits and our submerged traits.
Yeah.
And at the moment too, like if I look at your traits, you're sort of on top in your surface traits, you're sort of very yang, which is the male energy, and in the bottom, in your submerged traits, you're very female, which is the yin. So one other way you could is to try and tap into your female energy a little bit more, by doing things, whether it's dressing up in pink or putting on a dress or whatever, whatever sort of you figure is female, makes you feel like a female, then female energy.
Yeah.
Do a little bit more of that too. Or when you go, to kind of balance those energies out, because at the end of the day, that's also part of the journey is just being balanced.
Yeah.
Staying
Yeah.
balanced.
Exactly. And it's funny you say that because it is like one of the things, I don't know if this is like politically correct language anymore, but like I would call myself a tomboy growing up, like very like into sports and I didn't wear a lot of dresses and
Yeah.
those sort of things. And so, and even now as an adult, sometimes when I like have put on lipstick, I'm like, oh, who am I? Who is this person? Because it is a little uncomfortable for me almost. But then
Yeah.
in a way, but I also like it. It's weird. It's like I like it and
Yeah.
uncomfortable at the same time.
Yeah. So tap into that a little bit more and you'll balance out your energies really nicely. But yeah, so that's numerology. I mean, we can go a lot deeper because it goes into sort of relationships and how things play out. And sometimes I've sort of heard of people that have their surface traits, something happened in their life, whether it was traumatic or I can't remember exactly, but they almost dismissed all of their surface traits and just brought in all the submerged traits, and they were sort of living from the submerged traits. And it is so interesting to see just how it was still the same. They were just operating from
Interesting.
submerged traits than from what should really be on the surface, but they almost discarded it because of what had happened. And then, that's what came up. So it's really interesting how it does play out. And there's so many, there's so many variations to it too, because, you know, someone could have a one, but then totally not want to do any of the business stuff or pioneering things or be a leader. I mean, if I think about it now, I think at one stage I didn't want to. Like my teacher said in a class one day, "Oh, you have good leadership qualities." I was like, well, okay, if it means standing up and talking in front of people, then that's not me. So I totally like shied away from like being the leader. I think I fell into it more, as I became an adult. But like, it's definitely interesting how it all plays out.
It is. And I think, something to take away from this is it's not a end all be all. It's information.
Correct.
It's
Exactly.
information and
Yep.
it helps us move through life hopefully a little easier.
Yeah. No,
Um,
exactly that. It's just information. You can take it or leave it. You can take what resonates, what doesn't. It's really just, but at least there's an awareness of it now. Like once you have
yeah.
the awareness, it's hard to miss it, and it's hard to kind of ignore it. But yes, it's just information at the end of the day.
So if people are curious and they would like to do a numerology chart or reading with you, how do they get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me on my website, melanieivey.com. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, Melanie Ivey Numerology. Um, and they can follow me there or reach out to me on those platforms.
Awesome. I love that. And I encourage you if you've watched this or listened to this and you are curious now about going a little bit deeper into your own numerology, your own traits, reach out to Melanie. I think it's really powerful to be able to use these tools to get to know ourselves better. And that's why I do this podcast is to encourage everyone to be open to learning and growing and evolving as beings in this world. Thank you so much. And if any parting words that you would want to give people as they're on these journeys of self-discovery, what would you want to leave people with?
I think the biggest thing would be just to stay open. Um, as long as you're open and you're not discarding any information that's coming your way, then it definitely helps with the journey.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Stay open. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone, go check out melanieivey.com. All of the information is going to be in the show notes as well. I wish you a wonderful day of staying open to all possibilities that come your way. Thanks for listening to The Possibility Perspective on Transformation Talk Radio. For more information about the show, you can subscribe to the podcast. Visit thepossibilityperspective.com.